Dear Libra soul, something tried to invade your peace recently. A shadow crossed your energetic threshold and tried to break you from within, but what happened next changed everything. And that's exactly why you're here. This video isn't just a random click. You didn't arrive here by accident. What you're about to hear is not just a tarot reading, it's a divine revelation for Libra, a sacred unfolding that's been in motion behind the veil. Your higher self led you here because your soul whispered for truth and the universe answered. So let me ask you, have you felt it? That strange heaviness in the room that doesn't quite belong to you? The restless sleep, the unexplainable fatigue, the urge to clean or rearrange things without reason? That was never just a mood. It was a signal. And your soul picked it up loud and clear. I want you to know something, and I want you to hear it with every part of your being. You are not weak. You are not exposed. And you were never unprotected. Because the very moment that dark energy attempted to enter your sacred space, a higher force stood between you and the harm intended. And from that moment on, everything began to shift. At Zodiac Whisper Tarot, I don't just read cards, I translate the language of energy, divine signs, and soul contracts. As someone in the top 0.1% of this work, I'm here to tell you, what happened to you was real, but so was your defense. The first card drawn for you was Justice, your ruling archetype. And Libra, this card didn't just show up. It arrived to announce that your inner compass, your divine fairness, your refusal to betray your truth has awakened. The days of tolerating imbalances are ending. But more than that, you've called back your power. Not through confrontation. Through clarity. Through finally saying, enough, even if only in your heart. And that's when something extraordinary happened. Your silent, no more, became a spiritual alarm. And Archangel Michael, yes, the guardian of sacred boundaries, responded. A shield of protection descended. And the shadow? It began to retreat. But we're not stopping here. This video is going to walk you through what the shadow wanted, why it targeted you, and how the divine turned that moment into an opportunity for deep liberation. We'll look at your current tarot spread, your cosmic alignments, and a message channeled through both numerology and color frequencies. By the end of this, you will understand exactly why this had to happen and how to never be vulnerable in the same way again. Now, before we go deeper, let me take a moment to say this. Thank you for being here. For showing up for your soul. Every like, every comment, every subscription, you're not just supporting this channel. You're expanding this sacred circle of awakening souls that we're building together. And Libra, trust me, you're going to want to stay until the very end, because the universe is not finished speaking to you yet. So if something in your heart is already resonating, I invite you to confirm your connection now. Type this in the comments. I choose the light. I am protected. 777. Say it with intention. Say it like a soul who remembers its power. Let's begin. ChatGPT NOI. It may not have had a face. It didn't walk in through your front door or leave visible footprints on the floor. But the shadow found its way in through thought, through memory, through the subtle cracks of your emotional field. And the most telling part is, it didn't come looking for chouse, it came searching for your silence. For that sacred, quiet part of you that tries to keep the peace at all costs. The part of you, Libra, that has long confused harmony with self-erasure. What this moment reveals is something far deeper than spiritual symbolism. It speaks to your energetic design. As an air sign ruled by Venus, your essence is wired for balance, grace, diplomacy. You carry beauty in your field even when things around you feel messy or unpredictable. But this very gift can, at times, become your open gate. Because in your effort to avoid disruption, to preserve peace, you may sometimes let in what doesn't belong simply because saying no feels like too loud of a sound. The shadow that entered didn't barge in, it was invited by patterns you inherited, relationships that taught you love equals compliance, or wounds that made you believe asserting your needs was selfish. And often, those beliefs are passed down not in words but in gestures, through the quiet exhaustion in a mother's eyes, the withdrawn affection of someone you loved, or the pressure to keep things together even when you were falling apart inside. In tarot, this is where the High Priestess reversed emerges as a crucial symbol. She's not just about spiritual secrets or mystical knowledge. When reversed, she becomes the story of a person who once trusted their intuition but somewhere along the way, started second-guessing it. A person whose inner knowing was drowned out by noise. Who learned that sometimes, the safest place to hide was inside silence itself. But silence is not always sanctuary. Sometimes, it becomes the seedbed for shadows to grow. There is something profoundly human about this phase of your journey. You're not just confronting an external presence, you're facing the parts of yourself that learned to survive by shrinking. The parts that whispered, "Don't speak up," when something didn't feel right. The parts that feared boundaries because they might upset someone else's comfort. Yet the soul never forgets its natural shape. And at some point, just as it happened, it begins to realign. That realignment often starts subtly. You clean out a drawer, you stop answering a certain message, you move your bed, you find yourself crying at something you can't name. Those moments are sacred, because they are signals. Your energy is rejecting what no longer serves you. And here's the deeper truth: it is not your job to be the peacekeeper at the cost of your well-being. There is divine wisdom in knowing when to hold the line, when to step away, when to say, "This energy, this memory, this relationship no longer fits who I am becoming." The guidance for you here is gentle, yet powerful. You are not asked to fight. You are simply being asked to notice. To recognize that when something disrupts your peace repeatedly, it is not love. It is not a test. And it is not your burden to carry. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for everyone involved is to close the door. The scriptures remind us, not through judgment, but through compassion, what is meant for you will never require you to abandon your own light. Let that be your compass. When something dims your clarity, clouds your joy, confuses your heart, that is not a message from love. That is your soul saying, it's time to return home to yourself. So if you felt that something was trying to break you recently, take a breath. You are not broken. You are awakening. And this shadow? It has already begun to lose its hold. Keep going. Your light is reclaiming the room. Sometimes the shift happens so quietly, you almost miss it. You find yourself opening a window not because it's hot, but because something inside you needs air. You rearrange the furniture in your space not for decoration, but to change the way energy moves around you. You throw out an old item without much thought, but afterward, you breathe a little easier. These small actions are not random. They are signs that your energy field has started to speak on your behalf. This is what energetic awakening often looks like. It rarely begins with thunder. It begins with instinct. And you, dear Libra, are one of the most energetically sensitive signs in the zodiac. Ruled by Venus and guided by air, you move through life absorbing, feeling, adjusting. So when something enters your field that doesn't belong, something that disrupts the harmony you value so deeply, your body, your space, your intuition will respond, long before your conscious mind catches up. What happened here wasn't an accident. Your energy recognized what your words couldn't yet name. That a boundary needed to be drawn. That something or someone may be a pattern, a memory, or an old connection no longer aligned with your true frequency. And so your field, your soul, started shifting. Not in a fight or flight way, but in a quiet reorganization of truth. This is the moment where Queen of Swords emerges in your story, not as a warning, but as a reflection of who you are becoming. In tarot, the Queen of Swords isn't cold. She's clear. She doesn't argue, she simply sees. She is the voice of discernment without drama. And in this phase of your life, she symbolizes your capacity to hold compassion while still upholding your boundaries. You're learning how to say now without guilt. How to choose peace without sacrificing your integrity. This kind of clarity doesn't always feel like power at first. Sometimes it feels like distance. Like loss. But let me remind you of something subtle yet profound. Clarity is love in action. Not just for others, but for yourself. And when you quietly said no, even if it was only a silent declaration within your own heart, that was a monumental act of energetic sovereignty. And what followed that internal shift? A field of protection formed around you. Not in visible ways, but in vibration. You may not have seen it, but something did. The shadow felt it. And it began to retreat, not because it was forced, but because it no longer had permission to stay. There is a universal law at play here, one that even the most sacred texts gently point toward. The idea that when we stand in the truth of who we are, we invite protection, we embody light, and we repel what cannot match our honesty. You don't need to chase away darkness. You only need to stand in the light long enough for it to no longer recognize a home. Your healing didn't begin with confrontation. It began with self-honor. With listening to your inner nudges. With noticing what didn't feel quite right and choosing, for once, not to brush it aside. That is energy mastery. That is quiet leadership. That is a soul remembering its worth. So if you've been wondering why you've been cleaning more, closing your door earlier, avoiding certain conversations, or craving solitude, this is why. You're not becoming cold. You're becoming clear. And in clarity, protection forms. In truth, peace finds a home. What you're doing now isn't about rejecting the world, it's about reclaiming your inner world so that only what belongs can remain. That, dear Libra, is the true beginning of transformation. And it all started the moment your soul whispered, enough. Not every wound reveals itself as pain. Sometimes it shows up as tension in your shoulders that never quite leaves. A wave of sadness that hits out of nowhere. A distant memory you thought you had long buried, but suddenly, it stings again. These are not regressions, Libra. They are invitations. The shadow that once tried to enter your space may have been repelled by light, but in doing so, it stirred something within you. Not to break you, but to show you what still longs to be released. Healing, as many think, isn't always about doing more. More control. More trying. More pretending everything is okay. In fact, the most profound healing begins when you finally allow yourself to stop holding it all together. To stop proving your worth through strength alone. This is what the Temperance card whispers when it arrives in a reading, especially for you, an air sign ruled by balance and beauty. It does not demand speed or perfection. It invites harmony. A slowing down. A rebalancing from within. This stage of your journey isn't about defending yourself anymore. It's about softening. You've already stood firm, drawn boundaries, claimed your space. Now it's time to exhale. To stop carrying what no longer belongs to you. Because, Libra, carrying the weight of unresolved emotions just to prove that you're fine doesn't make you stronger, it makes you exhausted. And more importantly, it distances you from the version of you that is free, peaceful, and whole. There's wisdom in choosing what to let go of, not with resentment, but with clarity. You can acknowledge the past, you can feel every part of it, and still decide that it no longer deserves to sit at the table of your future. This is the heart of emotional maturity, making peace with the fact that not everything needs fixing. Some things simply need to be released. From a cosmic perspective, this moment is significant. Astrologically, Libra is currently experiencing transits that urge you to clean house, not just physically, but energetically. You may feel called to revisit emotional cycles, relationship patterns, or even parts of yourself you've outgrown. The universe isn't punishing you. It's refining you. It's inviting you to become more aligned with your higher self, not through struggle, but through conscious surrender. On a practical level, your body is your first energetic messenger. If you've been ignoring signs, tightness in your chest, shallow breathing, fatigue that rest doesn't solve, these are calls for self-honoring. Consider making micro adjustments in your routine, a 5-minute breathing exercise upon waking, a cup of warm water before coffee, magnesium-rich foods like leafy greens and almonds, and no screens an hour before bed. These choices seem small, but energetically, they are declarations. They say, I choose peace. I choose presence. And remember, healing doesn't happen all at once. It unfolds in layers. You may have moments where old emotions resurface. This is not failure, it's movement. True healing is not the absence of pain, but the decision to walk through it without becoming it. And sometimes, the most powerful transformation happens not in the doing, but in the being, in the stillness between breaths, in the silence after a release. If you feel overwhelmed, take comfort in this truth. You are not meant to carry everything alone. Even the most independent spirits need moments of surrender. What matters is that you continue showing up for yourself gently, honestly, and without judgment. There's a quiet kind of strength that comes from choosing your own well-being over appearances. You don't need to explain your healing process to anyone. It's sacred. It's yours. And it is unfolding exactly as it should. So, let yourself be tended to, not just by others, but by the part of you that finally knows, peace is not something you earn. It's something you allow. The shift is rarely loud. Most of the time, it arrives as a quiet decision, one you make deep within, often without words. Not to walk away from someone. Not to escape. But to honor the truth that you're no longer meant to vibrate at the frequency of what once was. That's what makes the Six of Swords such a powerful moment in your journey, Libra. It speaks not to physical movement, but to emotional migration. You're not necessarily changing locations, but you are absolutely changing direction internally, energetically, and perhaps even spiritually. There's a kind of wisdom that emerges when you stop asking the world to understand your evolution and simply start living it. That wisdom is what leads you away from what no longer mirrors your growth. It isn't rejection. It isn't rebellion. It's resonance. And your soul is simply done aligning with anything that doesn't honor the light you've worked so hard to reclaim. The people or circumstances that are falling away right now? That's not loss, it's calibration. As your frequency rises, certain connections naturally fade. Not because you're broken, and not because they're bad, but because your paths no longer echo the same rhythm. The beauty of this stage is in its subtlety. You begin to feel that conversations no longer flow the same way, that old narratives no longer define you, that situations once tolerated now feel heavy. That's not confusion, it's clarity in disguise. Then comes the World, the card of completion. But not the kind that shouts, "the end." No, this is the kind of closing that comes with stillness. With certainty. You don't need to announce your departure from an old story. You only need to stop rereading it. And when you do, a new kind of peace enters. A peace not dependent on others behaving differently or life being easier, but a peace rooted in finally choosing yourself without guilt. There's a quiet freedom in that. The kind that isn't flashy, but undeniably real. You're no longer trying to fix something that broke you. You're no longer waiting for someone else to give you permission to heal. You're not seeking closure in their words, you're finding it in your own energy shift. That's what true liberation feels like. The absence of need, the dissolving of tension, the presence of stillness after a long internal storm. And for someone like you, ruled by Venus, carrying the weight of relational harmony, this moment is deeply sacred. You've spent so much of your life being aware of others' needs, balancing what's fair, and finding the middle ground. But this time, you chose to be fair to yourself. This time, you honored the internal voice that said, "This chapter is done." That's not selfishness. That's alignment. You don't need to defend this choice. You only need to trust it. Just as the seasons don't ask permission to change, neither do you. The divine law is simple and consistent. What's meant for you will expand you, not shrink you. It will feel like truth in your body, not confusion in your chest. So if your chest feels lighter lately, don't question it. That's confirmation. That's your soul stepping through a door it longed for. What you've done is not small. You've disentangled from guilt. You've stopped waiting for someone else to rescue you. You've remembered that healing was never something you had to earn, it was something you were always allowed to claim. And now, you have. This is what liberation looks like when it's lived. When it's quiet. When it's yours. Keep walking. The chapter has closed, and your new world is already unfolding. There's something profoundly liberating about no longer needing to be understood. When you stop reaching outward for validation, and instead begin to quietly anchor into your own clarity, everything changes. This is what the appearance of the star in your reading reflects: not just hope, not just healing, but the return of something deeper, your inner light, free from distortion. And the most beautiful part is, that light was never gone. It was just waiting for you to choose it again. When you chose peace over proving a point, when you stepped away rather than staying to fix what never asked to be healed, when you extended compassion to yourself instead of chasing it in someone else, those were all acts of alignment. Not loud, not dramatic, but real. Every time you chose your well-being over chaos, you opened a space for something sacred to settle in: equilibrium. Harmony, not as a performance, but as a natural state. As someone deeply attuned to the air element, Libra, you're often caught between the need to keep the balance and the longing to be truly seen. You want your energy to feel light, gracious, loving, and so you sometimes absorb what's not yours, just to keep the scales from tipping. But here's the shift: the star shows up not when you've solved everything, but when you've decided that you are enough, even in the middle of the unfinished story. You no longer owe the world an explanation for why you've grown. You don't need to explain your silence, your absence, your peace. The divine doesn't ask you to be loud about your light, it simply asks you to remember that it's there. That it's always been there. And now, others may or may not see it. That's not the point. You see it. You feel it. And that's what matters. Your healing isn't a performance, it's a presence. It's the kind of radiance that doesn't demand the spotlight because it is the light. The star reminds us that true peace doesn't come from getting everything right, it comes from getting real with yourself. From not chasing a version of happiness that requires shrinking. From trusting that your softness is strength, that your detachment is grace, and that your journey is sacred even when no one's clapping. And this is where the deeper wisdom flows in. Sometimes, in trying to understand every detail, why it hurt, why it ended, why they changed us, stay tangled in a story we were never meant to finish. The truth is, not everything needs to be understood. Some things need to be outgrown. And as you rise into this lighter, clearer vibration, the shadows lose their grip, not because you destroyed them, but because you no longer feed them with your energy. There's a kind of freedom that arrives when you stop asking life to make sense and instead allow yourself to make peace. It's what some of the most ancient teachings have always pointed toward: the quiet power of surrender, not as giving up, but as returning to what's always been yours. A sense of worth that isn't earned through struggle, but remembered through grace. So, if lately you felt calmer even without closure, if you've been smiling more even in solitude, if you found yourself breathing easier even while still healing, that's not accidental. That's alignment. That's your soul reminding you, the light never left. It was just waiting for you to stop dimming it for the comfort of others. You didn't have to fight to get here. You only had to choose. And you did. You chose yourself. And in doing so, you've created the most powerful shift of all, not by force, not by fear, but by faith in your own becoming. Keep shining. You're already home. If you're still here with me at this point in the video, Libra, then I want you to take a deep breath, because something inside of you already knows. You didn't just watch a reading today. You answered a calling. You allowed yourself to be seen, not by me, but by your own soul. You've just crossed a threshold, even if it was subtle. Even if no one else noticed. But your energy noticed. Your heart noticed. And from this moment forward, you cannot unknow what your intuition already whispered to you. You are ready to live in your light without shrinking to make others comfortable. You don't need to be the strongest person in the room. You only need to be the one who chooses awareness over avoidance, clarity over confusion, and peace over proving a point. What's happened here is not small. It's not a coincidence. And it's certainly not just about cards. It's about how you've begun to honor the boundaries that protect your light and how you've stopped asking for permission to be who you truly are. So now I'll ask you, in the gentlest way possible, what will you do with everything you've remembered today? Will you carry it forward into your relationships, your decisions, your healing? Will you stop watering dead plants in hopes they'll come back to life? Or will you allow what has faded to stay in the past and finally give your full presence to the self that's growing in real time? I want to invite you to pause and ask yourself, what part of me was activated in this reading? What have I been holding on to that no longer honors the person I'm becoming? Where have I still been asking for healing from someone who was never meant to offer it? The truth is, your liberation didn't come from someone else saving you. It came from you choosing to stop waiting. From you choosing peace. And from you remembering that your value has never depended on how others treat you but on how deeply you choose to treat yourself with grace, with patience, and with love. So as a small but sacred act, I invite you to write in the comments below. May the divine light protect my soul, my home, and those I love. Amen. Let this be more than a phrase. Let it be a declaration, one that affirms how far you've come and how committed you are to moving forward with intention. This week, let the color deep blues surround you. It's your energetic armor, your quiet clarity, your soft strength. And when you see the number 6 appear, whether on clocks, receipts, or license plates, remember, it's a signal of healing, harmony, and reconnecting with your heart's true center. Here's what I want you to take with you. You don't need to dull your glow to keep the peace. You are Libra. You are the embodiment of balance, truth, and divine justice. And when you stand for yourself without apology, without defense, the universe stands behind you with more support than you could ever imagine. If this message spoke to something deep inside you, don't keep it to yourself. Share this video with someone who's also finding their light again. And if you want to stay connected to more messages like this, soft, sacred, and transformational, make sure you hit subscribe, like, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a reading from Zodiac Whisper Tarot. Because your light is meant to be seen. And from now on, the shadows will have no place to hide. You've returned home to yourself. And you're just getting started.